Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and we're here with part 1 of our Style Arc Patterns Monty shirt dress. Okay, so today we're gonna go over the materials we're gonna be using, and then I'm not doing any really alterations to this pattern, but I am gonna take you over to the cutting table and we're gonna talk about the size that I picked for my sister and why. I'm gonna go over her measurements, haha. She doesn't know that. But I'll go over her measurements and then why I picked the size that I did. This is a very, there's quite a bit of ease in this pattern. So if you are big busted, when I made mine, I actually did not have to do a full bust adjustment on it. I was able to get away with making a size for my upper shoulders and it's still fitting my bust just fine because this is a very loose fitting dress. Yeah, so I was able to get away without doing a full bust adjustment. So I am gonna take you over to the pattern. This is a PDF pattern. It's a large file because they have a separate pattern for the shirt dress and the actual shirt. Now this entire sew along will be just as good for the shirt as for the shirt dress. The only difference is just the way you hem it basically. So, I mean, you're hemming it a little bit longer. There's slits in the dress, there's not in the top. A little side note, I have made the top as well and I made it for my daughter. She has a long torso, but I did lengthen it by 2 inches and it's still pretty cropped. So she is busty, so sometimes that takes up some of the length, and she does have a long torso. But just as a side note, it is a pretty cropped shirt. So, I mean, if that's, yeah, just so you know, you know how much you want it to be cropped so that it's not too cropped, if that's your preference. Okay. Let's talk about fabrics. So first, I'm going to put video of both myself and my sister in this. I'm not sure how many weeks the sew along is going to be. Probably not all that many, because actually I haven't sewn the dress yet because I'm showing you the yardage today. But I'm actually showing you it finished with the marvels and magic that is editing. I'm filming this and then I'm going to film the sew along, and then I will, before this goes up, I will have gotten my sister, have hair in my eye, my sister footage of her actually in it. So yes, and I'm trying to think. I may show you footage of me and mine as well, just so you can kind of see. My sister and I are about 5 inches difference in height, 4 or 5 inches difference, probably closer to 5. 4 or 5 inches difference in height. She is not nearly as busty as I am. We are both short torsoed. She has got legs and arms that go on 4 miles, but we are both probably pretty rectangular shape. We don't have much delineation in our waists, if any. And our hips are shaped a little bit differently, but we're pretty similar. So anyway, I will show you the different of both of us in it, just so you can kind of see, keeping in mind that her arms and legs are just much more lengthy than mine. She has really long arms and legs, because again, we're both very short-bodied. Anyway, she got that from my maternal grandmother. Okay, so let's talk about fabric. Now for mine, I used a linen, and for this one, I'm also using a linen. The one for mine I actually bought at a shop in southern Indiana in Evansville called Let's Sew. It's a similar weight though to the linen that I'm using today. So for the linen for my sister's, look at this color she picked. It's a very grade purple. So a lilac, I guess you would call that. Isn't that pretty? I sent her to the fabric store. They're online down in New Zealand, their online shop. This is their vintage finish linen, which is like their standard linen, like a good dress weight. They have a heavy weight as well, but this is, I think it's called a vintage finish, but it's their exclusive line. It comes in a ton of colors. So I had her go through and pick out which color she wanted, and she picked this purple. So that's what I grabbed. So we've got this purple for her, and I thought this would be really easy for you guys to see as well. So very excited about this. The only other notions that we're really going to be using, interfacing, I love the Pletsch PerfectFuse sheer, and I'm just using the white on this one. I usually keep the white and the black in my stash at all times. I also keep the PerfectFuse medium for my heavier weight, you know, if I'm doing any tailoring or any of that stuff. It just works great, and I also keep it in white and black in my stash, and those are kind of my go-tos for interfacing. But I'll be using the sheer on this dress, and that will be for the collar and the placket. Is there a placket? Gosh, I haven't sewn this pattern in a while. I can't remember if there's a placket or a facing. Either or, the front where the buttons are will be interfaced in some way, shape, or form. Then the final thing we're gonna need are buttons, and actually I have these little vintage buttons for my stash. They're kind of in a smoky gray, which I thought might be kind of nice on the front of that shirt. I also thought like a horn type button, you know, like a tortoiseshell slash horn looking button would be nice. That's what I'll be using. And I have 8 buttons here. I think that should be enough. I think that should be enough. I mean, you can loosely go by what a pattern suggests with buttons. It all just kind of depends on how how close you like your buttons to be. Obviously you don't want to be gaping, but I think 8 should get us all the way down the front. And now I'm trying to think if there are, I don't think the pocket flaps have a button, so we should be good on that. So yeah, buttons. I have ordered some from WAWAK, and if they do come before I need to attach the buttons, I may switch out the buttons, because I did grab some like a brown tortoiseshell horn type of button from them in 2 different shades. Like I think one's called a caramel and one's called a tan maybe, or a brown, I can't remember. One's a lighter and one's a darker, but it's kind of a horn type of button. How many times can I say that? Okay, so that is, yes, that's really all you need for this pattern. You know, in Style Arc fashion, the instructions on this pattern are very minimal. I mean, they just all print off on that one piece of paper, and we'll go take a look at that here at the cutting table right now. So hopefully this sew along will allow you to be able to make, because I find this is probably one of a little bit trickier one of their patterns. Just with the collar and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully this will be helpful to you. I love this pattern. I love it. Gives like a notched lapel type of look, the way it kind of pops open. I get a lot of compliments on this dress when I wear it. So, oh, and on mine, I have shortened the pattern by 2 inches for my height. I will not be touching the length at all for my sister, because she's like 5'6", 5'7". So won't be changing the length for her. Okay, that's all I have for now. Let's go over to the cutting table, and then I will see you guys again next week. Okay, so let's take a look at this pattern. I have it all taped together. This one's a little bit paper hungry. It also, for whatever reason, it doesn't come in layers, so you have to print off all the sizes, which is a little annoying. I usually appreciate when I can just print off, you know, one size or a couple of sizes if I'm having to grade or whatever. But anyway, so I've got everything printed, and it's like, I don't know, 46 pages or something. You'll also notice I don't trim. I can see through my paper, and so I don't even know if you could, yeah, I don't trim, but we'll talk about the pattern here in a second. Okay, so these are the first, I think, 4 pages or so, 5, I don't know, of the instructions. So you've got the picture, you've got the schematic here. I will say that this does look longer. The shirt does appear longer here than what it actually is. So just be aware of that if you're making the shirt. The only difference in construction is that we'll be sewing side slits in the dress, whereas in the shirt you don't have that. It's just a straight hem. So pretty similar. All right, so that's page 1. Page 2, in these are your instructions for making the pattern. Now, this may be a little too far away for you to read. So my sister falls in, and they don't have the size chart that comes with the pattern. You have to look at that on their website, which is a little, you know, annoying. But anyway, they do have the finished measurements, which really are the most important ones. So I went through, and according to my sister's measurements, she fits right into a size 10. But as I'm looking at the finished measurements here, so her bust measurement is 36.5 inches. And for a 10, it's 42 and an eighth, or for a 10, and then for an 8, it's 40 and an eighth. Well, for an 8, that is almost, you know, within, however, my brain doesn't want to do, within 3/8 of an inch of 4 inches, which I think is plenty of ease. And I know her, yeah, because a 42, you're almost at 6 inches of ease in the bust. That's a lot. And it is an oversized garment, but you just kind of want to look at that and decide how much. Now, when you look at the waist, it doesn't even have the waist measurement because it's pretty straight down. So the hip on this is 42 and an eighth, and her hip is 39 inches. So that's going to give us 3 inches of ease in the hip, and I think that's going to be plenty. Because again, it goes straight down from the bust pretty much. I mean, obviously it gets a little bit fuller. There's a pleat in the back, and so that's giving you the little extra room there with the pleat. So I think, and then the hip in the 10 is 44 and an eighth, which is like 5 inches of ease. I think she's going to be fine in an 8. So that's what I think I'm going to cut for her. Yeah, because I don't want it, I mean, I think that's going to be absolutely fine. That's still going to hang and not cling, and I think that she's going to prefer that. So we're going to cut an 8 for her. And again, she falls into a size 10. Gosh. Normally I like at least 2 inches of ease in a hip just for movement. She's going to have 3. I don't know, folks. I may grade out to a 10. I may do a size 8 at the top and then grade to a 10 just to make sure that it has that loose feel around her hip. Mine is a size 10, a straight size 10. And again, I was fine. And my bust is 40 inches and the finished bust on a 10 is 42 and an eighth. But my hip is smaller than hers. My hip is smaller than hers, but my bust is bigger. Yeah, so I think I'm going to do a size 8 in the upper body. And then, and I'll show you the pattern here in a second. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. An 8 in the upper body, and then I'm going to grade to a 10 when we get to the hip. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that. Okay, the other part in this pattern, they have this little schematic of all the pattern pieces, and they color code it so you can kind of see which pieces go on what. It's not super clear, but that is what that is. And then they do have a few little illustrations for the trickier parts. So, you know, doing the collar, again, if you've done it before, it's somewhat helpful, I guess. But we'll obviously be going through all of this. Then it talks about downloading the pattern. There's your test square. And then here is the schematic of everything that you should be printing out. So this prints out because there is the seam here. And the shirt and the dress are the same from the bust point up. It's just the difference. You have a separate bottom for the shirt and for the dress. So that's why it's so many pages. I don't know why they couldn't just do a cut line for the top, but they didn't. So, so there we have it. Okay, let's talk about the pattern really quick. I'm just gonna pan out a little bit. Okay, so I have, they put theirs together a little differently. Now, again, you can trim. I don't, so it just saves me time. Okay, so they've got numbers here at the top, 5, and then down here would be 6. Obviously, it's covered up on this piece of paper. And then going across from left to right, it goes A, B, C, and D. That's the same for all the rows. So this is, this connects up to row, this is row 5, and that's kind of how that goes. Also, they have tips or hints on here. So it'll show you, like, here's the shoulder notch. It says this is the collar piece. It says shoulder, so you know that that's the shoulder notch. So it is helpful. And again, if you've made something similar, it's not impossible. Like, it is easy. I also want to make note, and it can be kind of confusing. Thankfully, they've done colors, but there's a solid line. So for instance, the size 8 is orange. And so here's the solid line. That's the cutting line. And then there is an orange dotted line. That's the sewing line. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a hint. So for instance, here on the collar, there's just 1/4 inch. Is that right? See, it can get very confusing with the different sizes. I would measure that. That's 1/4 inch there. 1/4 inch there, but then it's 3/8 inch here at the shoulder. So the seam line does change. That's something that you're gonna want to keep your eye on. Or is that 1/2 inch? Let's measure it. Here I am just spouting off measurements. Nope, 3/8. 3/8. And then I bet that's 1/4. Yep, that's 1/4. And that's 1/4, which makes sense. Okay. So that's just kind of the pattern in a nutshell. Solid line's what you want to cut on. Dotted line will be what you sew on, technically. So that gives you an idea of what the seam allowance is. Okay, I'm going to cut out my pieces, and then I will come back here and show you how I have graded. And I also had a couple questions about the sleeve, and so I will address those here in just a second. All right, so I have everything cut out and graded, and we're going to talk about that here in just a second. So you should have either this is the bottom skirt, or you should have the bottom part of the shirt, depending on which one you're making. This is for the back, and then this is the front. We'll talk about the grading I did there. Those are the only two pieces I did any kind of adjustment. Then you'll have your facing piece. I do want to make note, it does say, you know, like lower skirt dress, cut 1 pair. That means to cut 2, mirrored, you know. So if you're cutting it out on a folded piece of fabric, you know, you'd be cutting it out twice. I mean, once, but you would get 2 mirrored pairs. And for instance, on the back piece, it says cut 1 on fold, 1 main on fold, which is obviously just cut the 1 on the fold. So I just wanted to clarify what that means. This facing piece says cut 1 pair main and fuse. That means that you're going to cut 1 pair, so you'll lay this on a double folded piece of fabric, or, you know, cut it out mirrored. And then you need to do the same for interfacing, fusible interfacing. So that's what that means, the cut 1 pair and fuse. Now, the pocket, cut 2 pairs main, because you need 4 pocket pieces. You know, 1 for each side of the front, 1 for each side of the back to make the full pocket. So there's your pocket piece. You'll need 4 of those. Here's your shirt. So far, we'll talk about interfacing in a second. Here's the top of the shirt, front, and then the back, which gets cut on the fold. Here is your collar, and then your little pocket flap, which gets 4 of the pocket flaps. Okay, which is, it's like a faux pocket on the front. All right, so you're going to need to, you know, this says collar, cut 1 pair main and fuse. I believe I'm positive I interfaced both collar pieces. So you'll need to cut 2 of the collar pieces and interface both of those, 4 of the pocket flaps, and those don't need to be interfaced. 1 shirt back on the fold, 1 shirt, sorry, not shirt, 1 top back on the fold, 1 top front, just cutting 2, 4 pockets, throwing things there. You need 2 of the facings, and you need both of those interfaced. And then you need 2 bottom fronts and 1 bottom back on the fold. Now let's talk about what I did for adjusting the pattern. Okay, so I cut a size 8 out of all those pieces that I just showed you, which was sizing down for her. Now here on the front, I have cut a size 8 up here to this second notch. Hopefully, yeah. There's a notch right up here at the top that kind of indicates the seam allowance, and then here's the second notch, and this is actually where you stop sewing because this part goes into the armhole. So right at that notch, I started and I graded out to the 10, and by this first notch, which is the pocket, because I wanted that to be all on one size. I didn't want to be grading in between sizes at the pocket opening. And then I'm just a 10 all the straight way, all the way down. And then I just used this and held it up to the back and drew the same line. So that's all I did to grade out to the 10 at the hip for her, but everything else is cut is an 8. Okay, I had questions about the armhole. So the armhole, let me pull the back away. We'll just look at the front. Get the front. All right, so here is the front of your dress. Obviously, these get sewn together like so. I mean, there's a dart in there, but when I say that there's a dart in there, when you have a curved line like this, that means a dart has been sewn or has been put into the cut, into the seam line, is what I'm trying to say, and not well. All right, so obviously your top gets sewn at the shoulder seam, and then you'll sew your side seams, and you stop at this notch right here. And then this will be sewn like this. And then from the shoulder seam to this point is left open for your arm. And then this gets finished, we neaten it, and it gets folded in. I've had questions on if there's a way that you can extend the arm to give yourself a little bit longer of a sleeve. And technically Yes. It's not going to be easy though. You're basically wanting to lengthen this just a little bit, but keep in mind, the more you go past the shoulder line, because you're already past, you know, the technical shoulder point, to give yourself a little bit of a sleeve, the more wrinkles you're going to have under your armpit. That's just the nature of a grown-on sleeve. And you're just going to want to gosh, I don't even, you want to, I mean, you're going to want to just do maybe a sharp curve and come out. And then, so lengthen this piece. I mean, you could try that. Do a muslin though and see. You're also going to want to make sure you're leaving yourself enough room in the arm, because the further you go down the arm, your arm gets bigger as you get to your bicep, obviously, and then it starts to get smaller again. So it could get really tight around a bicep if you're too small, you know, if you're just staying straight. So keep that in mind as well. But yeah, you could definitely play around with that a little bit. I wouldn't extend it too much, but you could definitely play around with that a little bit and see if you wanted to extend that just a little bit more to give yourself a little bit more sleeve length. So yeah, I would just basically extend this top piece out, but then you're going to need to true this piece down here, so that this notch and this notch line up, because this, remember, this is also part of the sleeve, this notch down here on this bottom piece. So you're going to have to curve to extend. Just make sure everything trues up nicely. Okay. So that's how I would do it. Although I mean, if you look at the girl here, it's a pretty, I mean, it's a pretty decent sleeve length, like, you know, and it comes off at a very nice angle. It's not straight across the arm. I have very large biceps in proportion to the rest of my body, and they're not muscular, they're just big arms, but I really appreciate a diagonal line across that fullest part of my arm, especially because I have a full bust as well. But I found this to be very flattering on my arm. So, I mean, maybe you don't find it flattering on my arm, and that's fine. Anyway, okay, so that's where we're going to stop today. Your homework for the week is to cut out your fabric and also get the pieces fused that with interfacing that need to be fused, and we will start sewing next week. Bye.